to welcome on stage for our second panel discussion, three leading lights from corporate India and two of India's go-to persons on policy making. I request our audience to kindly take your seats once again. What links God's own country, incredible India, make in India, and startup India? If you said Amitabh Kant, then you would be right. As one of India's most dynamic bureaucrats, Mr. Kant has a stellar record, whether as industry secretary or the man who thought up the Atithi Devo Bhava campaign to involve taxi drivers and guides and immigration officials in the development of tourism. He is now the CEO of Niti Aayog, which is catalyzing development across the country. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Amitabh Kant? Ajay Singh helped start SpiceJet in 2005. He exited from the airline in 2010 before buying it back again from near shutdown in 2015, scripting one of the most remarkable turnaround stories in global aviation. Mr. Singh is also a keen sports person. He's the president of the Boxing Federation of India. He's also a vice president of the Indian Olympic Association. But his most famous story, one which I'm sure he will regale his grandchildren with, goes something like this. In January of 2014, inside a Lutyens bungalow here in Delhi, a core group of the BJP's top strategists went back and forth on which catchphrase they should use as the election slogan. Ajay Singh made a spur-of-the-moment proposal pitching for the now famous catchphrase, Ab ki baar Modi Sarkar. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Ajay Singh. Fiscal policy making in India, it is sometimes said it's about finding the right equilibrium between North Block in New Delhi, which houses the Finance Ministry, and Mint Street in Mumbai, which is where the RBI headquarters is. Who would know this better than Mr. Subhash Chandra Garg, who is the Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance. As the Economic Affairs Secretary, Mr. Garg plays a key role in drafting India's biggest fiscal policy exercise, the Union Budget. He also serves on the board of the RBI. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Subhash Chandra Garg. Sunita Reddy is the Managing Director of Apollo Hospitals. She has spearheaded Apollo Hospitals into a forerunner of integrated healthcare service provider of global standards. She was instrumental in bringing the first FDI into healthcare in India and subsequently in taking the organization to the international equity markets through a successful global depository receipt, or the GDR. Educated at the Stella Maris College in Chennai and Harvard Business School, Ms. Reddy is an avid fitness enthusiast. She's mindful about healthy living and following a balanced diet. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Sunita Reddy. And finally, at one time, you will see Robin Raina, Ebix INX chairman, on news channels talking about how he drove his company towards faster growth. Right next second, you will see pictures of him in slums, miles away from the hustle and bustle of a metropolis. He is trailblazing, both in business and in charity, and leaves other company executives no excuse not to follow his trail. In his own words, Mr. Raina wants to make charity fashionable and cool. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robin Raina. And these leading lights from the corporate world and the government will be in conversation with CNBC TV 18 Managing Editor Shereen Bhan for a session titled Get, Set, Grow.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much once again for joining us here at the Rising India Summit. I think we're done with the spiritual and the religious conversation for this evening. So let's get down to talking about data and get down to talking about presenting a roadmap, an economic roadmap for India's growth. You know, Bill Gates often says that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. So we're going to try and balance that out here on this panel this evening. Mr. Kant, let me start by asking you, as Zaka introduced you, you're the man behind Incredible India, you're the man behind Make in India, the man behind Startup India. What are you going to put your might behind next?
Shereen, I think, if you have to grow at 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period, firstly, I think India must get into a lot of sunrise industries. So you need to get into electric vehicles, need to get into battery storage, you need to get into a vast range of new things. But it's not possible for India to grow at 9 to 10% till you don't do growth with equity. So I think India needs to do a lot in terms of learning outcomes and nutritional standards, on health outcomes of all things. And I think if you look at the map of India, you still have about 115 districts which keep India backward. And therefore, we have this major aspirational district program where we work in partnership with the states, and you need these districts to really grow rapidly so that we have a lot of growth in areas which are keeping India backwards. So 3 things to my mind, really about quite often we get into sunset industries. We need to crack the next generation of industries, and we need to really focus on social sectors, and we need to crack areas which keep India backwards.
Okay, don't put the mic down yet. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, because you said that we need to focus on sunrise sectors. You gave the example of the electric vehicle space. Now, this was the stated objective of the government when it came to office, that we wanted to put the electric mobility engine, sort of fire that up in India. It has been almost 5 years now. That plan hasn't quite taken off. We had a conversation on the FAME policy and the new FAME policy. You expected that to have happened in January of this year, which is already delayed. It was expected last year. My question then is that you identify sunrise sectors, but then the action plan or the deliverable doesn't tie in with the slogan.
No, it's happening. We've had several rounds of very detailed deliberations. It's a new area of growth. So there are a whole range of issues relating to this, because it's a dynamic sector which is constantly getting disrupted. So I think in the next fortnight or so, you will have a very clear policy framework around this, both on the mobility side and in terms of the storage side. In fact, a lot of work around this has already been done.
No, but the larger question that I'm asking, Mr. Kant, is, and I hope that we will see this in the next fortnight, because you gave me a date in January which has come and gone by. My question is that often we squander the opportunities that stare us in the face. We make the slogans, but we don't tie it up with action.
So Shereen, these issues are, firstly, these are areas where there's a lot of global disruption happening, number one. Number two, you have to get into the right technology. And number three, I think a lot of interministerial work needs to be done. You need to do your homework right.
But isn't Niti Aayog now the interministerial hub? It's almost a new PMO in Delhi, right?
No, that's not possible. We work in coordination with a lot of ministries. We get driven by Cabinet Secretariat and the PMO. A lot of work on this has been done. And I think we are almost at the final stages of this. So you will have a policy not merely on mobility, but you need a very, very disruptionist policy on energy and storage. I think all that is finding a place.
Okay, so 3 areas of focus. Focus on the aspirational districts that have been identified, on the social sector and the sunrise sectors, not the sunset sectors going forward. Mr. Garg, if I could ask you, sir, in terms of the policy roadmap going forward, and we've got several big policy items coming up. We've got the 15th Finance Commission. We've got possibly the Direct Taxes Code, which has been sort of pending for several years now. We've also got GST 2.0, and whether we are going to see any sort of a collapse as far as the current multi-tier rate structure is concerned. What would you be watching out for in terms of the big policy triggers going forward?
See, I think India's aspiration is now getting very clearly captured in this big, I wouldn't call it slogan, but big ambitious statement of a $10 trillion economy being our aim and goal in a foreseeable future in 15 years or 13 years. That's what will drive our most of the actions and the policies. A kind of expression was made in the budget when a very multi-dimensional, the 10-directional vision was also set out.
Yeah.
But in more concrete terms, if you were to come, I think the going forward from here would not be as easy, I would say. It would require a lot of action. So one of the big things which we'll need to do is to make all our factors of production very competitive. Whether it is capital, whether it is labor, whether it is even entrepreneurship, all of them. And there is a whole lot of policy action which will be required. And that is where what you mentioned will also tie in. So whether the Finance Commission comes up with recommendations, how do you share resources in a way where the productivity, the skills of the people, etc. can be raised, or for that matter GST, which has introduced a lot of competitiveness and has made our processes more efficient, our logistics more efficient. The next version, the remaining one of the reforms would also make it much better. So I think all of them would drive this bigger policy agenda to make our factors of production competitive. There is also the other part which has also been stated. Now we need to raise our aims higher. We'll probably not be satisfied with capturing Indian markets only. We'll have to have global markets. That is where you come. The vision which sets out of green earth and blue skies, which is essentially driving our environmental and the cleanliness agenda, I think all these things would need to be addressed.
Well, a lot that you talked about is stuff that we need to get done, but I want to talk about a crucial issue which you didn't address, which could perhaps be a constraint on growth, and that is debt. Not just the debt that the private sector is dealing with, but the debt that the government is dealing with as well. Almost to the tune of 50% currently. The expectation as per the FRBM Act is to bring that down by 2025. I don't know whether we're going to be able to get there or not. The question then is, if India's debt to GDP ratio continues to be high and continues to constrain government spending, what will you prioritize? Where will the government spend its money? And what should the government spend its money on?
See, essentially the higher GDP or debt to GDP ratio for the government signify that we are leaving much less investable funds in the hands of private sector. And therefore the debt to GDP ratio of the government should come down to make more productive investment possible in the private sector. And that's the stated goal. Will you
get to 40% by 2025?
Yes, we will. Because today we are not at 50%. We are at about 45%. We brought it down from close to about 53% 7 to 8 years back. And if we grow at about 11% to 12% nominal terms, and if we contain our fiscal deficit to about 3%, which is our goal, we would achieve it in 5 years' time, which is what the statutory mandate is by 24-25.
Okay, but is this a big challenge? Are you worried about this? Will this constrain growth?
It is a challenge because as you come closer to 3% kind of thing, managing fisc becomes more and more difficult because there is demand on resources all the time. But I think there is a very clear articulation of government's commitment that this is what we will need to do it. We recognize that there is a more productive investment possible in the public sector. And therefore, this path, and we have worked out our calculations, by 24-25 we are destined and we should be able to achieve.
You're still smiling when you say that. I hope that's a smile that reflects confidence, sir. But let me come to Ajay Singh. Amitabh Kant just spoke about wanting to bet on sunrise sectors. By all accounts, the Indian aviation sector is a sector where currently we're underpenetrated. The future in terms of demand is significant. We've been growing at a very fast clip. In fact, the estimation is that passenger traffic growth will require about 1,000 planes in India by 2030. But look at the other side. We have a shortage of pilots. We need about 25,000 new pilots. We don't have them. Your competition is actually rerouting its schedule because there is a shortage as far as pilots is concerned. Infrastructure has not kept pace with the growth in passenger traffic. Has your sector been identified as a sunrise sector? Is it getting what this sector's true potential is?
Well, firstly, aviation in India is one of the most exciting sectors to be in. 20% growth for the last 3 years.
If you manage to survive and continue to fly.
Yeah. So let me respond to that. See, we are growing at 20% a year for the last 3 years. It's the fastest growing aviation sector anywhere in the world. And with this, there are just 3% of Indians that fly. So clearly, this number is going to go up as disposable income goes up. Obviously, the numbers are going to go up. And there is a aviation revolution which is happening in the country. If you look at the number of new cities which are being added to the aviation map, there were 75 airports in this country in the first 70 years of our independence. And just in the last 2 years, we've added more than 25 airports. In the next 2 years, we'll add another 50 airports. So just in 3 years, we'll be doubling the number of airports we have. So it's been a terrific ride for the aviation space. Now, having said that, there is this mindset problem that we still have in India, where, flying was always supposed to be for the rich. So you taxed it like you taxed color television at some point of time, or you taxed computers at one point of time. So the taxes on aviation are completely crazy. I mean, we pay today the highest amount that any country pays for aviation turbine fuel. We pay the highest amount that anybody pays for airports, and this clearly needs to change. Mr. Garg was talking about being internationally competitive. He's absolutely right. Today, if you give us a level playing field, we would give terrific competition, and I dare say we would beat the likes of Emirates and Etihad and Qatar. All we need is a level playing field. Unfortunately, we are not getting that. We are pushing it. I think there is understanding in large sections of the government that this needs to happen, but I think they need to take that political step. There are some states which are still not extremely supportive. Hopefully, we can convince them sooner rather than later, but this is something that's actually growing the economy of the states. This is something that's growing tourism in the states. It's absolutely criminal. It's a shame that we are not able to give a level playing field to airlines.
The reason why we're discussing aviation and healthcare is because the kind of multiplier impact that these two sectors can have on the economy, and specifically as far as job creation is concerned. But since I was talking about government debt, and I ask you that, Mr. Singh, in the context of what we're seeing with Indian aviation. I mean, CAPA's numbers are, as far as FY19 is concerned, full service carriers are expected to have a consolidated loss of $1.5 billion. For low-cost carriers, consolidated loss of about $200 million. If the two gentlemen who are sitting with you on this panel don't get the message that you're trying to send out, will we be able to realize the potential of this sector?
Well, firstly, those numbers are wrong.
Okay.
The model is changing.
Okay.
You will see that the low-cost airlines actually will not lose money, but we could be making a significant sum of money if we had a level playing field, if our taxes were the same, let's say, as they are in Dubai or in the UK or in the US and all such countries. There is a terrific opportunity that we have in India because, the numbers, as you said, the demand is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
You start flights today to Pakyong in Sikkim, or you start a flight to Ajmer Sharif, or, name any destination which has not had a flight. You fill up the plane within 3 days. You start booking and the plane is full after 3 days. So the demand is there. But we need to get our taxes down. We also need to stop shipping our planes overseas. What's happening is today, because we don't support our own, maintenance MRO providers, all airlines are forced to send their planes outside, which is completely ridiculous because we have the engineers, we have the facilities. There's no reason why we shouldn't be doing this in India. We should be providing the pilots that you spoke about, not only to ourselves, but to the rest of the world. This is, we have young, bright, intelligent, educated people.
Yes.
We can do much more in terms of being an aviation superpower, and we are just not doing as much as we probably should be doing.
Okay, let me get both of you to respond, and I'll start by asking you, Mr. Kant, because now you're also looking after aviation in a sense. In fact, you just got 5 airports up for privatization, and they've got the bids coming in today, and the Adanis have won that. But let me ask you, sir, this is a sector that has been identified as a sunrise sector. We've had the conversation about getting MROs to operate in India for the last several years. The ATF conversation has been happening for the last several years. Why is it that after having identified the problems and the pain points, we still haven't acted?
Shereen, we've acted in a wide range of areas, and one of the reasons why civil aviation is growing by about 20 to 23% plus is simply because a lot of support to the sector has been given, both in terms of infrastructure and otherwise. I think a lot of focus has been done on infrastructure, and as you said, we've just been through another transparent, competitive process. I don't think the results have been announced, unless you know more than all government servants.
I thought that the results are in, sir. For 5, they're in. For Guwahati, it's out tomorrow.
So the bids have come in, and they're being examined and all that. It will go through its process, but it's been a very transparent, competitive process.
So the winner hasn't been announced?
No, not yet. So it goes through a very transparent, competitive bidding process, and I think good thing, it just shows that the huge amount of demand for infrastructure, good infrastructure creation in India. So I think on the issue of taxation, I quite agree that there has to be reasonable level of taxation, and you know, the GST is settling down. We've just had yesterday a major concession on
real estate.
construction, you know, coming down from 12 to 5% on an affordable housing to 1%. But the important thing is, for this country to grow rapidly, GST must grow. We must understand the challenges of the country. If every sector we keep going around giving concessions without the GST settling down, it will be very difficult. But I'm quite confident.
Sir, we are not asking for a
No,
concession.
no.
We are asking to be included in the GST.
That's true.
No, that's simply because we must understand that
the states.
that we are living in a country which is bigger than 24 countries of Europe.
Yes.
I mean, you expect that the central government to take all the decisions. It will not be proper in a federal polity. The states have to be on board in both the case of civil aviation and in the case of petroleum as well. So I think we are there right now. GST is maturing very rapidly, and I think in due course you will have states also playing ball on this, as they have done in the case of construction industry. And I think it's very important. I quite agree with Ajay, because there's a massive multiplier impact. And it has a huge spin-off in terms of travel and tourism.
And employment. I keep coming
creation.
back to that. Yes, Mr. Garg, very quickly.
No, I think this is a very right kind of articulation. It gels very well with what I was saying about the competitiveness. We have done quite a lot about ease of doing business.
Yes.
I think we need to now concentrate on cost of doing business. That is where most of the issues which he has raised.
And that's not only going to be the RBI's problem, right? It will also be North Block's problem.
No, this is not at all RBI. This is basically, in a way, another element which is also very costly in India is the interest cost. But we also have power, which is very much costlier than many other countries.
Sure.
The kind of taxes and other duties and levies which he mentioned. So there is a whole lot of issues. We will need to make our businesses competitive. And for that purpose, we will need to address the cost of doing business.
You know, when this government came to office, the roadmap for corporate tax reduction to 25% was announced. It's been done for a large universe. It hasn't happened as far as the main corporates are concerned. As we look at the next government coming to office, what do you believe is the need of the hour in terms of tax, balancing that with India's competitiveness?
So you see, more than 99% of the corporates have been addressed, and the taxes have been brought down to 25%. Some are remaining. Revenue considerations are also important. We need to keep that in mind. But I believe, like what I was saying in the context of the cost, if we can grow businesses, more volume probably can address the fiscal considerations as well. So those kind of considerations will be important to decide the policy going forward.
Okay, Sunita, let me come to you now, because the other sector that we decided to focus on was the healthcare sector. It's on, don't worry about it. And you know, I'll ask you this in the context of, again, the kind of demand and the kind of headroom for growth that we see for the healthcare sector. The government, of course, has announced the Ayushman Bharat program, which is a very positive step, and we hope that it will build on the momentum. But just look at the numbers as far as healthcare is concerned. 1 nurse for every 1,000 to 2,000 people, 0.7 hospital beds for 1,000 people, the doctor-patient ratio at 79.7 per lakh, which is one of the worst in terms of emerging and developing markets. I mean, the potential for this sector to be a multiplier, again, is significant. What will it take to get it moving beyond where we already are? And a lot of progress has been made, to be fair.
So I think if we were to look at it, what will it take to really get to what the government really wants to do? Even if you look at Ayushman Bharat, you know, there are 3 ways to look at it. One is, how do you define success? Really, the government has created access, but on the same page, it's not really helped create the infrastructure. So we need to look at how do we create infrastructure. The second issue is that we need to look at cost. Because the cost structures in India are different from the rest of the world. However, we're doing it at 1/10 of the international cost. And it is becoming more expensive. I would like to mention taxation, just as Ajay said, because we had negative GST, we pay 33% tax, plus we pay customs duty. So delivering healthcare in India is actually very expensive. The third is quality. We came to India so that we could, you know, set up quality of international standards. So there should be no compromise on clinical outcomes. So the government definitely needs to invest in skilling. And we need to double the number of doctors, triple the number of nurses, and quadruple the number of paramedics. And to do that, they have to allow education, they have to allow the corporatization of medical education, and they have to allow infrastructure, status, and tax exemptions for healthcare
But
to really grow.
that's a long list of demands for the
It
government,
is.
and it's not a new list of demands either. This has been an often repeated list of demands. But a larger question that I want to ask you, Sunita, in the context of healthcare and not just healthcare services. But India has aspired for a commercial drug discovery for at least the last 2 decades since I've been tracking this sector. China possibly is on the verge of one. If you take a look at R&D spends, less than 1% is what India spends as a percentage of GDP on R&D. It's 2.5% for the US, 2.5% for China, 4% plus for countries like Israel. What is the need of the hour to encourage the private sector? Because everywhere else, it is the private sector that focuses on innovation. What will it take for corporate India to innovate?
So first, I think one level of collaboration. I think we need to work with the government with a sense of trust so that we know that, that they know what we are capable of, so our clinical outcomes will be good. The second is that we don't do stage 1 and stage 2 clinical trials. So there's very little of research and patents happening out of India. The third, I truly believe, is that, we need to start thinking about how much investable surplus our healthcare companies are making to actually invest into this. And if you look at free cash flows of many of these companies, they are stressed.
They are stressed as well. Okay, well, there's a roadmap, Mr. Kant and Mr. Garg, for the healthcare sector as well, which could be a multiplier. Again, Niti and North Block both working on this. A quick comment from you before I get Robin in.
Shereen, 2 points I want to make. One is that, when we are doing this aspirational district program, we realize that there's a severe shortage of doctors in India. And I think we need to really break down the norms of medical education. We have 22 times more engineers than doctors in India. We need to do something. But on the second point about innovation, let me tell you that if it wasn't for India, the world would have never got medicines at the right price point.
Yeah.
And a lot of innovation has
the
happened.
generic industry,
a lot of
absolutely.
innovation. So
No, but sir,
India,
we're still importing 65 to 70% of API from China. That's the point that I'm making, that we should be doing that here in India.
Let me come to that point. So actually, India is truly the pharmacy of the world. A lot of work has been done by Indian entrepreneurship in the pharmacy sector has been truly top class. And the third point I want to make is that India has demonstrated its ability, and Ayushman Bharat is a great example of that. You're providing health insurance to 500 million people, more than the population of USA, Europe, Mexico put together. And India has demonstrated its ability to provide medical health care at 1/10 the cost of what the European and the American nation does.
Absolutely.
And that's a great example.
I completely with you on that. And I think that the point Sunita is also making is how do you ensure that it continues to scale? Mr. Garg, very quickly, and I'll get Robin in.
I think health offers enormous opportunities for growth, for the welfare, both. I think that's very important. Ayushman Bharat, the whole logic of that is to provide this kind of human capital improvement as well as the infrastructure improvement in the country for the health. I think infrastructure, health already has the infrastructure status, but if something is missing, that's the easier part. We can provide that.
That's the easier part to fix. That's right.
But what we are looking for now is to actually the expansion of health facilities in tier 2, tier 3
through the
cities,
wellness centers, which is
so
also one part of the Ayushman Bharat
millions
program.
of people who are now getting coverage in health facilities, they can get nearer. So there is an enormous possibility of expanding this.
Absolutely. Robin, you're putting your money where your mouth is. You're investing in India. You've invested to the tune of almost $3 billion. A bunch of acquisitions, in fact, over a dozen acquisitions that you've done in India. What are you most confident about? What are you betting on when you put your money in India?
I think what India has to now realize is, in my mind, I call it India 2.0. India 2.0 has to happen. What the difference between 1.0 and 2.0 is, until now, India has done a lot of technology work, but we have been a mercenary nation. We've really done work for others. What we need to do, what government of India needs to focus on and give subsidy, tax subsidy, and encourage industry to build intellectual property. We need to differentiate between exports and exports related to intellectual property that is created in India, because what hasn't happened till now in India is that we don't really see an MNC coming out of India and spreading across the world. We see the reverse happening in India. So what needs to happen is there has to be an absolute focus on intellectual property right generation. And I think that's the focus of companies like mine. We're absolutely betting on creation of intellectual property, making India manufacturing based, making India a learning organization because of all the managerial skills that India has and the technology knowledge that India has, and then spreading the base all across the world.
So the number one wish, and I'm going to get wrap-up comments from each of you, and I'll start by asking you, Robin, if there was one wish that you could make to the government that's sitting here in the panel today, and to the corporate sector as well, what would it be?
I would say rationalize taxes.
Rationalize taxes. That seems to be the common theme here this evening. Mr. Garg, I hope you're listening, sir. Rationalize taxes, maybe in the full budget?
See, rationalization of taxation has been on the top of the government. The whole system of indirect taxes has been rationalized, simplified. I think that need to be recognized. 16 taxes got subsumed in GST, so many cesses. This is the biggest rationalization and simplification anywhere in the world.
You said cesses were rationalized. The speculation is that to fund the agri scheme that has already been announced, there could be the possibility of an agri cess. Is that a revenue-raising measure that you're considering?
I haven't heard of it.
You haven't heard of this. Okay, that gives us a little bit of a breather as well. Sunita Reddy, final comments from you. One wish and two wishes. Go ahead.
I wish Sadhguru was here. But clearly the two things that I would ask for, one is, like you said, rationalized taxes. We really are paying too much, and no infrastructure company needs to pay that because we do provide lots of jobs to people. The second is to encourage people by giving subsidies. And I think government allocation spending on healthcare currently at 1.2 is too low. The allocation should move to 2.6 if Ayushman Bharat is to be a complete success.
Okay, Ajay Singh, you were introduced as the man who gave us Ab Ki Baar Modi Sarkar. Are you going to be spinning another line this time around as well?
Well, I think that this government really does deserve a second term. I mean, the kind of work that has happened in the last 5 years, I can tell you, I have not seen this happen in my lifetime. Look at the GST, look at the bankruptcy code, look at what has happened with getting toilets, getting gas cylinders in, getting electricity, if not to every household, at least to every village. I think fabulous work, the kind of work that's been done in the road sector. I think incredible work. This government definitely deserves a second term, and I would definitely say Phir Ek Baar Modi Sarkar.
Okay, Phir Ek Baar Modi Sarkar. That's the slogan here from Ajay Singh. I will give Mr. Garg and Mr. Kant the final say. Sir, you've heard what the panelists have to say, but what would your number one priority be as we look forward?
No, I think to translate that vision which has been set out is our number one priority as and when the new government takes over.
And the biggest challenge?
The challenge, of course, is the enormity of deficit in infrastructure.
Yeah.
Space is our biggest challenge. The deficit in capital in the country, which I think also need to be supplemented by foreign resources and otherwise. And lastly, I think the human capital also, which requires enormous. So these three big deficits, I think, are the biggest.
Those three big deficits need to be bridged. Mr. Kant, final comments from you, sir.
Shereen, I'm a great believer in growth, but I think it's very important to focus on nutrition, learning outcomes, and health. And the Prime Minister's focus on the 115 aspirational district of India. You can't have growth without equity. And if you are able to transform these 115 districts, you'll automatically have growth at 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for detailing the roadmap for 8% plus growth here on our panel at Rising India this evening. We hope that government does its bit, and we hope that industry delivers on the promises made as well. Thank you very much for joining us here this evening. Appreciate your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause for Amitabh Kant, Ajay Singh, Subhash Chandra Garg, Sunita Reddy, and Robin Raina. As our panelists go back and take their places in the audience, may I request Shereen to continue to be on.